Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever applies to you. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Julia. I'm a contemporary singing specialist based in Australia, and today I'm super excited to be diving on into Chris Stapleton's Tennessee Whiskey. This song, it was so popular. It went off in the contemporary singing space, in the teaching space. This song got super popular, absolutely blew up. Everybody wanted to sing it. Everyone wanted to sing the run that's in it. So I cannot wait to be diving on into this one with you today because I'm very familiar with the track recording, but I have never actually watched a live performance of Chris Stapleton performing this song. So I'm very curious to hear what differences he might decide to do in the live performance compared to what happened on the track. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Used to spend my nights out in the barroom. Liquor was the only love I'd known. But you rescued me from reaching for the bottom and brought me back from being too far gone. You're right smooth as Tennessee whiskey. You're right sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And honey, I stay stoned on your love all the time.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna get this out of the way right at the beginning. I flipping love this song. It's just got so many vocal and musical elements that are so cruisy and easy to listen to. So just bear in mind, there's like a tinge of bias in this analysis slash breakdown. Although when I first heard this song, I was certain that I was about to hear like Etta James, I'd Rather Go Blind, just because of how similar the opening sequence is, the opening chord progression and the chord progression, even the feel, like that 12/8 feel. It's really similar to Etta James' I'd Rather Go Blind. So when I first heard this song, I was certain I was about to hear Etta. But alas, no, it was not Etta. It was Chris Stapleton with his husky, smooth, wonderful voice. And I mean, his timbre is the kind of timbre that you don't really forget all that easily. And part of that is not just to do with the husky quality, it's to do with his placement. So in particular on Warm, you can really hear that distortion in his voice coming through. So his husk is working like overtime there, and I'll break down how we seem to think Husk is made further into the video, I think, because I don't want to like take up too much time now. It's only been the first pause. But you can feel how it's still got the twangy quality there. I'll also break down twang later. For his voice, he's got a twangy quality there, and in particular in the start of the chorus, you can really hear it sitting there, very forward placement. It's almost like it's sitting in his teeth and in his lips. But then the moment he goes to Warm, that vowel opens up and the sound shifts back a little bit. So you get almost more of a throaty element to his singing, and it's this placement shift that I hear in a lot of other artists, whether it's soul, R&B, blues, jazz. It kind of comes from that kind of musical approach, I guess. That being said, though, I haven't listened to a whole heap of country, so perhaps the more I listen to it, the more I will hear it as a part of a specific derivative of country as well. Not sure. But there's that twangy element there. And for me, with my listening tastes and the kinds of things that I teach, I hear that as coming from a very soulful blues type of vocal approach. And his husk is working overtime in there. We get like the distortion is also what makes his voice sound so unique, and it really stands out. It's kind of hard actually when you're going for a heavy belt to also have distortion and for it to still like not slow down and be smooth at the same time. There are times actually where I feel like Chris's voice is almost like a contradiction because he has this husk and this level of distortion in his sound, and at the exact same time, it's really smooth. Like maybe it's the influence of the music, but he's got like both of those qualities there. And maybe we'll dive into that a little bit more later. But so far, really similar in approach to the track. I haven't heard anything that he's really done differently. But yeah, there's so much life in a live performance compared to the track recording as well. So maybe that's the only difference that I'm sensing at the moment is this, of course, feels a lot more real because he's engaging with real people in a real physical situation or circumstance. So there's that added element of his live performance there that really shines through from him, even though he's just playing on the guitar, he's just singing into a microphone. There's no like dance breakdowns, there's no like fireworks going off, there's none of that. It just feels really authentic and genuine, like that connection being there because it's in that live setting. So let's just keep going.
Oh, as a glass
I'll break down the notes for that riff later as well.
of wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And honey, I stay stoned on your love all the time.
Oh, okay.
For love in all the same old places, y'all. Found the bottom of the bottle's always dry. Yes, it is. Yes, it is now. But when you poured out your heart, I didn't waste it. 'Cause there's nothing like your love to give me.
Okay, so this second verse had some choices vocally that are different to the track. First of all, this glissando, this I call it like a dirty gliss when you like really like move through it. It's almost like a chainsaw sound at times because it's got like some grit to it, some intensity to it. It's not just a glide. He's got this gliss happening, and he doesn't normally do that in the track recording.
Look for love in all the same old places, y'all.
Yeah, okay. So that's what I mean there by that glissando. He's got this sliding and there's an intensity to it. So you got this and that's actually a dynamic choice. He's got very forward placement, but you can control the amount of intensity you want to put into that kind of sound. And as he's sliding between those pitches, we also get like a volume dynamic thing. So we have this feeling of the slide, both pitch wise, but also dynamics wise. This is like really engaging as far as like playing with musical tension goes because you're not quite sure where it's going to go. And for someone like me who hasn't listened to a live performance before, that to me stands out as something different to what he has done on the recording, which are those like tiny little things that you want in your live performance, something that's going to surprise and delight you. So let's go back and re-listen to that because he glides through that sitting super far forward. We have elements of twang in there, but he's also got a little bit of space in the back of that sound as well. Otherwise, it would be way too bright. It might start to err a little bit more towards that musical theatre sound. So twang is really, really important if you're a contemporary vocalist. Maybe we should just talk about this now. When I'm referring to twang, I don't necessarily mean a particular accent, although I'm aware that some accents do have a great deal of twang to them. Twang is an acoustic phenomena that occurs when the epiglottic fold is curved over slightly. The more resonating spaces that you have within your vocal tract, the more formant frequencies that the sound that you're creating with all of its harmonics above have to filter through. And as you're filtering through these different spaces within the pharynx, it's going to strengthen certain harmonic qualities in the sound. And so twang is created when the epiglottic fold is curved over. That extra resonating cavity gives us that brightness to the vocal quality that we're listening to. I mean, God, take a shot every time I say the word vocal quality, I guess. Or maybe don't. I don't know what your limits are. Anyway, so this bright tonal quality that we get into the sound as vocalists, this gives us a perceived volume and can alleviate a lot of the necessity for like really heavy vocal folds to try to create more amplitude, give us more volume. So that twang's really, really important because it gives you a clear sound. It also gives you perceived volume, so you're not having to work quite as hard. That being said, a purely twangy sound doesn't tend to also have a whole lot of what feels like mass, feels like a beef or a fullness to the sound, and you have to achieve that through the other parts of the resonating tract and perhaps with a little bit of a harder reduction at the vocal fold level to create some amplitude there. You just don't want to overdo it because then you can wind up being super tired. If you wind up going too mass heavy, you might hear other vocal coaches refer to that as like pulling chest, where they're like basically trying to muscle their way through a sound. It's really heavy at the vocal fold level and probably feels physically heavy for the singer as well, like they're having to work for it just a touch. But anyway, so that's what I mean by twang. I'm referring to that acoustic phenomena where it creates a brightness to the vocal quality, not necessarily a particular accent. Because I do know that some accents, particularly in parts of America, are referred to as having a twang. That is that, but I'm saying like you can have twang regardless of what your accent is, and as contemporary singers, we like to use it a lot. In this example here, he is using an element of twang, but he's also got that space at the back, a little bit more mass in the sound, and then of course that really unique husk that Chris has in his sound. Anyway, so we have that. And he's really using that placement, a little bit of twang, a little bit of intensity on the dynamics. It really feels like you're building towards something, and that's that tension I was mentioning earlier. Anyway, let's keep going. Wait, no, the second one. Oh, goodness. See, I get hung up talking about vocal stuff, and then I forget what I was listening to. It was when he went up for the word high. When he gets towards this word high, let's find it.
'Cause there's nothing like your love to give me.
Really going for it there. He's a little bit more mass heavy in this sound compared to the track recording. So if you go and you listen to the track recording, you might notice that the quality itself is a little bit more open, a little bit more free, and a little bit lighter as well. If you're like thinking of it as like a literal weight on the voice, it's a lighter approach, how he starts that sound in the track recording compared to what he just did then, which requires a little bit more compression. And he kind of increased his dynamic while he was up there from a place of a little bit of constriction, but that compression to the tonal quality, he kind of kept it there and increased his dynamic from that position as opposed to relaxing the pharynx, dropping the larynx a little bit, and letting more of that projection and twang carry that sound. So let's keep going now. But yeah, already couple of little things that are different to the track recording, and I do think that they add to this live performance. You know, people who are watching this are going to be able to take that away and be like, oh, that was so cool. Anyway, let's keep going. Yeah.
Tennessee whiskey.
Notice that they put like a little bit more of a like an accent on whiskey, and it shows up in the jaw movement of the female vocalist, who, by the way, is also equally very smooth. She's got that twang there to balance out against Chris's, but she's also got some soulful properties to her sound as well, but not so unique that it's clashing with what Chris is doing as a vocalist. She's doing an excellent job of that backup singer role there, where you need that harmony, and if you are the backup singer, your job is to blend into the soloist, not expect the soloist to have to cater to you, whereas it's slightly different if you have two soloists that are singing contrasting lines against each other. They both kind of have to hold their unique qualities there, so it still sounds like a balanced duet as opposed to I'm singing, this is my backup singer. I mean, she's doing a great job there because it's seamless when they're singing together, so she's doing a really good job. All right, let's revisit that, because on whiskey, you can this is a bit of a little, almost like a little bit of a whip into that sound. Tiny little musical accents like that. Again, they keep interest.
It's Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah, look at that.
You're a sweet strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And honey, I stay stoned on your love all the time.
Even the way they fall on the all the time, like that's just, they have to be able to do that to the same intensity for it to sound good. Yeah, no, she's doing great work. Chris's Melisma back here, and we'll touch on what it takes to have a flexible voice at the end there. He added in a few extra notes from like the Melisma that we're used to hearing, which is typically taken from the first one. A few extra little notes in there. It was a little bit heavier, his approach this time. If we contrast them side by side, the first one had a little bit more consistent momentum through it. This one felt a little bit heavier and like he was putting a little bit of extra beef into that melisma there, as opposed to it being like super flexible, super agile, and like floaty through the notes. We had a little bit extra grit, some mass happening in that sound there. And yeah, I'm actually super impressed with how flexible Chris's voice is, considering that he went for that mass heavy approach, but also had that husk there the whole time. If we're going to talk about husk, I will save that for the end because I just really want to finish this. I'm enjoying this live performance, and it must have been so just chill and laid back to be there in that audience and just experiencing this music because it's a great song. Anyway, we'll break down Husk and other things later. Let's keep going. I really want to see what else he does for the end here.
Strawberry wine, you're as warm as a glass of brandy, and honey, I stay stoned on your love all the time. Tennessee whiskey, you're as sweet as strawberry wine, you're as warm as a glass of brandy, honey, I stay stoned on your love all the time. Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, oh, Tennessee whiskey, you're right smooth. It's Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, oh, Tennessee whiskey. Thank you all so much. You've been a wonderful audience. Good night.
Cool. So it sounds like it was his closing number. I really enjoyed the build at the end of this song. It feels like because you've been sitting in this really laid back 12/8 feel the entire time, it makes really easy listening. And that means that when we do start to build, it truly feels like we're going somewhere because we've just been cruisy, laid back, 12/8 feel, enjoying the bluesy elements within the music. And then now we're building. You got the kit doing a little bit more, you got the guitar getting more excited. And then you hit a point where it feels like musical satisfaction. And then he pulls back, but not so much that we've like lost all that energy. It really reinvigorates that final chorus. So that, I mean, what a great performance. What a great way to end your show, especially with a song that everybody wants to hear. Well, maybe not everybody. But I mean, if you're at his concert, I'm assuming that you're probably going to want to hear that song at least once. Okay. Let's talk Husk. Let's talk Melisma. Let's talk placement. Because I think those are probably the key things that I want to take from this performance if I'm to be discussing the vocal side of things. So first up, Husk. Husk is one of those unique qualities that for some people, they feel like they have to do a certain something in order to achieve a husky voice. The truth is you don't need to be smoking like every single day for 15 years in order to have a husky voice, although that is certainly one way in which you can, I guess, create some instability in your vocal folds enough to create a husky sound as a speaker as well as a singer. I don't advocate for that to be the method that you use to get there. So there are a few ways in which the like voice science community has kind of like looked into it, but nothing super confirmed. So I'm just going to talk about the theories that we have for now, things that we've like identified, but I think more studies need to be done personally on how some of these sounds are achieved and on a broader spectrum of people, and also taking into account obviously their background, their daily habits, all of that stuff, because your voice is essentially the product of your life at some stage. So, for example, the people who maybe smoke a heap that wind up with something like Ranke's edema, that can stop them wanting to be as flexible and as pliable. And it's that flexibility and that pliability that's really, really important if you want your vocal folds to function healthily. But it's also one of the things that you need if you're going to create a clean sound. So, clean meaning without any distortion or any interruptions to the sound. So if you really want husk or distortion to your sound, there are like a few different ways in which sometimes this quality to the voice is achieved. The first is more closely related to like your harsh vocal effects, where something within the vocal tract is vibrating and it's distorting the sound because it's like an extra piece of mucosa that's flapping within your airstream, and it can cause distortion in your singing quality. So that's one of the ways in which I've heard people say that they've achieved distortion in their sound. Another way that I've seen people explain husk or distortion in your sound is at the vocal fold level. So at the vocal fold level, we kind of have a waveform when they're vibrating. They are meant to be able to touch completely from front to back. Some people have a vocal fold chink. That's perfectly normal as well, but like at least the part that's not the chink being able to touch completely. So if I'm to like hold my hands up like this, let's pretend I've like opened my throat this way so you can see directly, and the vocal folds sit horizontally. They create this wave format which blows the bottom of the folds open into the airflow, and then they get sucked back in again. I've mentioned this before on a few other videos. It's called the Bernoulli effect. Basically, you want to have this contact of the fold in order to create a clean sound that doesn't have any distortion in it. And this leads me to describing the way in which you can have perhaps some distortion or husk in your vocal quality, and that's where the vocal folds are not evenly touching. They're not producing that clean sound because they're not cleanly getting contact throughout the entirety of the waveform. I've heard this be referred to as an unbalanced vocal fold, and that's where different parts of the vocal fold are actually touching with more intensity than others, and perhaps even part of the fold isn't necessarily touching at all, which means the ones that are getting contact, it can lead to issues if you're using it all the time, because it means only that one part of the voice is constantly receiving like complete contact, and because perhaps you want a clean sound, you're like force the adduction in which those bits actually hit even harder. But let's not talk vocal health, let's just talk vocal quality. So that imbalance of the contact at the vocal fold level can cause interruptions in what kind of phonation you actually get, thus a husky sound. So I think the easiest analogy, and this leads to the next way in which I was going to describe you can get a husky sound, when you've been really, really sick and you've had, maybe you've lost your voice, you've done a lot of coughing. Coughing slaps the vocal folds together with a lot of intensity, and that can cause swelling or edema. You might notice that when you are really sick, or you've done lots of coughing, or something has happened, it's gotten into your airways that's caused you to cough or react or something, your voice might not sound exactly the same as what you're usually accustomed to. And there are times when you're really sick, or you're really tired, you're really overworked, you've been talking all day. Let's say you're a speaking professional, your job requires you to be constantly talking, like teachers and doctors and people in schools and all that kind of stuff. There are so many jobs that require a heavy vocal load just from a speaking perspective. But let's just say you're sick, you're tired, your voice is overworked, you're exhausted. You might notice that your voice will slip into fry, but also a husky tonality faster, in particular when you're sick. You might notice you've come out of this sickness, you're getting a little bit of your voice back, it sits a lot lower because the vocal folds are still slightly swollen, it's sitting a lot lower pitch-wise, and you're getting this like husky, and you go, yes, I can sing some soul right now, even though you know you have maybe like a couple of days before your clean voice, it recovers and your clean voice comes back. That's an example that like just general population, even if you're not like a professional voice user, you've probably experienced it before, coming out of illness or having been really tired. And the reason for that is because you do get swelling, which can change that evenness of contact that I was talking about. So their wave formation, the vibration is not completely balanced, and so the phonation is not completely balanced. Unfortunately, an extreme example of this is if you are a vocalist who has developed nodules. That's when you get too much interruption in the sound, because depending on whether they're soft or hard fibrous, you might not actually be able to get enough contact in your sound to create anything other than a broken aphonic contact from the nodule itself. It's interrupting that waveform to the point where you can no longer phonate completely at all. I mean, that's an extreme version, and that's if you're going down the avenue of pathologies, but that's an extreme example of what it would be like to have really unbalanced vocal folds. And the reason for that is because there's like a physical protrusion on the vocal fold that is stopping that contact from happening. Whereas we're going to take a few steps back, Husk and other vocal effects or extended singing techniques rather, that you can use as a performer, and you can switch it on and off. That is to do with those two factors that I mentioned earlier. So there's either something in the vocal tract that's vibrating, causing a disturbance in the air, or there's something at the vocal fold level that, whether it's unbalanced folds, whether something is growing on there, whether you've been smoking something that's at a really high temperature, or you've been surrounded by things that are at a really high temperature that you're constantly breathing in that perhaps are of a chemical nature. This can cause vocal fold scarring. So, that can also cause an interruption in the vocal fold, the waveform, thus also putting other things in the sound. So if you have like that gritty quality in your speaking voice as well as your singing voice, that's usually sometimes what's happening. Anyway, so those are the few ways in which it's been explained to me, but also that perhaps make the most sense as I understand vocal physiology at present on what could potentially be causing that grit, that texture, that little extra something crackly in the sound. And it does sound good, so I don't want to dissuade anyone away from using Husk. And I mean, Chris Stapleton certainly uses a lot of it, whether he's mass heavy, whether he's light, whether he's in that speech quality, whether he's using twang. There's this element of Husk in his sound that definitely stands out as unique to his timbre, so you're always going to recognize his voice as a performer. But I will say it's usually, if you're a performer and you're a vocal user, it's usually a better position to be in if it's something you can switch on and off, because then it's a choice rather than something that's like so permanently part of your technique that even if you are tired, you perhaps have overworked, you want to be able to switch that off. So I'm not going to bash any extended vocal singing techniques. They sound so cool and stylistically appropriate. And this is the musical environment in which those styles are applicable, blah, 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 marketability, yada, yada, yada. There's a myriad of reasons why contemporary singing has so many extended singing techniques that perhaps don't have like the best bandwidth as far as remaining efficient. I've used a video game reference before. Perhaps we'll understand it, perhaps we won't, but this is my analogy for it. You know how if you're playing a video game and your character has like HP and MP in order to cast like special attacks, and HP is like general health. Think of when you use an extended singing technique as you're using your MP up, and certain vocal techniques that you use, certain extended singing techniques that you might use, they're going to have different amounts of, a cost. So let's say you're belting, that might cost you 3 MP. Let's say you're using Husk, maybe that's going to cost you more. If you start to blast through all of your MP over a certain period of time, then it doesn't stop. It's not that you can't keep casting. Oh God, I sound like a total nerd right now, whatever. It's not like you can't keep casting, it's that it starts to burn through your HP instead. And that's when you start to get into dangerous territory of overworked or overuse, and then that can lead us down that pathology pathway that I mentioned earlier. Anyway, so I thought that I would dive into Husk at the end here because I did know I wanted to dive into it just a little bit more. With that being said, though, I do just want to say that different people are going to have different rates of recovery. In many ways, vocalists are very similar to athletes in that some athletes have a faster recovery time and some singers have a faster recovery time. So you might notice that there are examples of professional voice users, in particular singers, who can use these extended singing techniques every day for their entire careers and have huge, long careers. And they never seem to have any vocal injuries or any pathologies or anything like that. Sometimes there are just people who are genetically capable of recovering from these things faster, and so it's not going to wear on them in the same way that perhaps it does for another person or another character who doesn't have that kind of recovery rate. So, you as an individual also play a massive role in what kind of extended singing techniques that you can use. And in this case, we used Husk, we used belt, we had melismas, so really fast, agile passages. That's more of along the lines of a technique, but also your genetics can play a role in how fast your voice wants to move. Some voices they want to run all day, every day. They can go super fast, super accurate on all their notes. Other voices may need to work a little bit harder in order to even achieve perhaps some of the baby runs that Chris Stapleton was using on this. So him being able to put mass into a sound with that Husk, regardless of how it's being developed, whether in the vocal tract or at the vocal fold level, with agility, like that's pretty impressive. Not just stylistically, but from a physiological standpoint. If we put those things I explained earlier all into like the one thing, that's a pretty impressive vocal profile to be working with there. Not just extended singing techniques, distortion in the sound, mass plus flexibility. Like, not a whole heap of voices are going to be able to do exactly what he does as a vocalist. And it's what makes him stand out, and it's what does make him unique, and part of why he's so enjoyable to listen to as well. Because if you even put someone who had two of those factors, Husk and mass, if they were not able to execute at the same speed, the same agility that Chris does, it's not going to sound right. It's not going to sound good. So I really appreciate being able to hear like different cocktails of voice usage in different environments, because it's like, wow, that person's amazing. How'd they do that? I actually did notice though, as we went throughout the performance, he started to sing from a place of increased compression. And by the time we got to the third time running through the riff, you might notice there's a lot more movement in his head as he's actually singing that riff. And it's not like we're getting as full a tone from him. So he's putting more grit, more intensity into that riff, and it's getting a little bit tighter as he's going along throughout the performance. Whether that's through his deliberate intention as a vocalist, as a musician, or whether it's the end of the show, he's starting to get a little bit tired. Like I said earlier, sometimes Husk, for some people, it's not got like a lot of efficiency all the time. He still made it through the song, so, not a big deal. But those kinds of things might indicate that he needs to rest after this particular song. Anyway, small comment on placement. Aside from the things I described earlier, he also shifted things very bright and forward, sometimes up through the nose, so some nasality in his singing as well at times. Although his vowels were not as nasalized as perhaps one might expect, considering that we quite regularly can confuse a nasalized tone and a twangy tone. And also when it was chucking those vowels back, I noticed that on the ends of some of his phrases, he would, it's almost like it was a husky vibrato, but it wasn't a vibrato that was super even all the time, and it would tend to taper off into a vocal fry sound. Just a few of his phrases as he got towards the end, he would taper off onto a vocal fry. Husk, placement, the riff. Okay, let's go back. Let's listen to this riff. I'll give you your notes and some tips on if you're wanting to work on this riff. I always feel like I'm too slow on this riff. And that's because my voice is similar to what I mentioned earlier, where some people's voices just don't want to move as quickly. So I always feel like I'm a millisecond out whenever I try to do this riff with him. So I'm not going to embarrass myself today by attempting it. I'll just give you the notes because I've had to break it down so many times. Breaking it down.
You're as warm as a glass of brandy.
It's such a killer riff. Oh my god, it's so good. All right, so let's. How many notes is that? I'm gonna do this on a da, so that every single note is really clear. Da 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 da. Damn. Okay. He's got 17 notes in this run. He's got 17 notes in the warm part of this run, so it's not including the your as, because that would be 19 notes. But yeah, damn. I'm going to break down the approach as far as the speed of certain sections with you guys, and then you can do with it what you will. You'll have the notes clearly outlined, and I'll have some tips after we do this. That was very blocky, but I want you to hear every single note nice and slowly. So what he's doing in the beginning is a little bit slower. Da, 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 da. And then this next one, think of it as connected and starts to speed up halfway through. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. So we've got this slightly slower in the beginning. Da, 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 da. Starts to speed up as we move through that particular section. Da 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 is like the last little chunk. So, there's your notes. You can always give it a go yourself. If I was to give any tips, and this is from the perspective of someone whose voice doesn't move very quickly, but perhaps you're just starting out, you're not quite sure why your voice doesn't want to move very quickly, or maybe just naturally it needs to build up some more agility before it's going to be successfully able to move through this riff at the speed that Chris does it. First tip would be to start light. Try not to put too much mass in the sound. Lighter voices have an easier time moving quickly. So if you're trying to copy the heavier tonality that Chris is using, he's doing this on a belting timbre, like a belting setup. It's got a decent enough mass in there. So if you are new to this riff, if you're new to riffing in general, just start off light. Starting off light, slow it down. So take those notes, put them to the correct rhythm over Chris if you want, or even like nab the song and just use like a slow-mo app or something just to slow down that section. Sing it really slow with him first. Get used to the idea of certain sections are going to speed up and go in a different direction. That can take some time to get your head around, but slow it down, take your time. Your voice will get there. It just, for some people, you might have to work a little harder than others or put a little bit more time into it. Start soft, slow down. Third tip, mind your vowel and sound placement. If you're struggling with momentum, maybe listen again to what vowel they're actually moving through, because something as simple as adjusting the vowel can keep that momentum going and make it feel like you still have a connection, something behind you. Otherwise, it can start to feel like you slow down the further into the riff you get. So be mindful of your vowel and your placement changes. And my last tip is practice. Don't get frustrated if it doesn't work straight away. And perhaps there are going to be some riffs that, for right now, for where you're at, they might be a bit beyond you. And that's okay. Everybody's like riff and run journey is slightly different. So don't beat yourself up if it doesn't want to go very quickly. Otherwise, I would have had to have beat myself up many, many times over. Anyway, I think that's probably where I want to leave this one today. I feel like we broke down a few key things that contribute to Chris as a vocalist and what makes him a more unique sounding timbre. I really enjoyed this song. I really enjoy being able to listen to these kinds of voices as well, where they have that little extra grit, that little extra husk to it. It's really enjoyable, and it's very exciting as a both as a pedagogue, but also as like someone who likes voice science, to try to figure out what might be happening physiologically as well that can contribute towards that sound. And I'm more than happy to explore those voices with you guys as whenever you want to drop by and watch videos. If you did enjoy today's video, please be sure to give it a like, click the subscribe button and the bell notification beside it to know when I upload. I'm trying this new thing where I upload a little more frequently at present. So if you want to know when a new video goes up, make sure that those are selected. And if you really enjoyed it, maybe even feel free to share it. I'd really appreciate that, or leave a comment below. Comment below for the algorithm. Anyways, that is it. As usual, I hope you are staying safe. I hope you are staying healthy. And I will see you next time. Bye! The mic stand is finally fixed. Yay! Jaw tension be gone. Ah. Less smiling. Always hurty. Ugh. Did I just swallow a bug?